forbearance of the federal government. And it actually started in 1931 with a court case called Filburn, where the Supreme Court upheld that if you raise wheat on your own land and don't sell it and just use it for yourself, that's interstate commerce. And that power has given the federal government the ability to reach into all the areas that you legislate on here and through bureaucrats who were never elected anywhere tell you what to do. And that consumes 60% of your budget. And that's on average around the country. Other states it's a little higher, other states it's a little lower. So the question is how do we fix it? And I worked hard. I was a businessman. I went to med school as an older gentleman. I was known as Grandpa in med school. It's a whole lot better to go to med school when you're older because you know how to learn, you know how to work better, and you're not distracted by the young co-eds that are there as well. But what I learned there, I think is really apropos for you all, is don't treat the symptoms anymore because you're covering up the real disease. And as a 3-time cancer survivor and still battling stage 4 prostate cancer, I can't urge you enough to take the power that our founders gave you and utilize it to restore our country. You have these wonderful young people here attending today. The bill that the Congress has passed added $19,000 per person that they will pay back in their lifetime. Just that one bill. Just that one bill. The other thing that nobody tended to notice was Congress passed a bill that eliminated the debt ceiling. So no longer will we have Congress voting on whether or not we should increase our debt. It's a free-for-all now. So I left the Congress 2 years early, and I left for 2 reasons. One is I got passed a Google Your Good Government. You can find it right now at both openthebooks.com, or you can find it at, I'm trying to think of the name. I'll give it to you here in a minute. And what that showed us is where the money was going. And you've been bribed to a great degree out of the federal money because the federal money that's coming to your state is greater than the money that you tax in your state. So with the total that comes to you plus what you get to direct, plus what they tell you to direct, constitutes your budget. So everybody was really happy when we forced the GAO to look at the waste, fraud, and abuse and duplication in the federal government. And it comes to about $440 billion a year. And I was excited to have that information. So I went to all my colleagues, both sides of the aisle, and found 3 people that would help me eliminate that. And you know why? Because even waste, even fraud, even duplication has a constituency. And so to me, I class most of my former colleagues in one group. Is the oath to do what's good for the country as a whole in the long term greater than your desire to stay in your position. And I came to the conclusion that the Americans have lost that battle and that our founders gave us a way to fix this. They actually knew we would be here at this time. And Colonel George Mason stood up in the Constitutional Convention in front of everybody, and Madison notes in his notes, this is the only thing that was not contentious. And here's what he said. Do you know of any time in the history of man that a government has voluntarily ceded power back to its individuals? And it's never happened. And it's not going to happen for us either unless we take what George Mason gave us and utilize it. There'll be a lot of people that'll say this is a runaway. There never has been a runaway. The word runaway is a lexicon word that came when Phyllis Schlafly actually asked the Chief Justice on Roe v. Wade whether she should start and model an Article 5 Convention of the States to reverse Roe v. Wade. And of course, the Chief Justice was the deciding vote on that. He has no scholarship in any of his record of ever writing or studying Article 5. And so he had one of his clerks write an answer that said, oh, no, you couldn't do that because they'd liable to work in other areas. So you'll hear three reasons why we shouldn't do this. One is it's too dangerous. Well, I think there's no basis to that. It's dangerous not to do this. Number two is I'm afraid. Well, that's a legitimate reason to caution in your actions. But what we should really be afraid of is what's happening to our rights, our liberties, and especially you all. Because you're no longer getting to make the majority of the decisions that impact your citizens. An unelected bureaucrat is making those decisions for you. I'll give you an example. Oklahoma, while I was a U.S. Senator, I had Gary Ridley, head of transportation there, build 2 highways, one with federal money and one with state money alone. Just the regulatory cost of using federal money and building a highway increased the cost of the highway 50%. That's just a measure in terms of the regulatory costs when it comes to the Department of Transportation. So, and then the third thing is some people want to just raise money off scaring people. I'm doing this, traveling around. I was in 32 states last year. I was here 2 years ago. I'm doing this not because of me. It's not going to have an impact on me. It's not going to change one thing about my life. But it certainly has the opportunity to restore the opportunities that this country promised to our youth. And by failing to do what is necessary and what our founders knew would come a time we needed to do, by failing to do that, we are complicit with the U.S. Congress in wasting the resources and eliminating the opportunities for our children. I'm happy to answer any question. I've answered questions all across the country on this. I've studied it. I've written a book. All of you will be getting a book that documents the history, documents what's happened in the past, and documents why we should go forward. I hope you'll take the time to read it. It's rather short, but it's based and it's footnoted. Everything is referenced, double-checked, measured twice before we cut once. And I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Okay, I don't believe we don't have anything written down up here for further testimony, so we're going to go ahead and close that and offer it back to the proponent for a brief rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At your discretion, in honor of our distinguished guest that's here today, I would like to waive my right to rebuttal and invite Dr. Coburn back to the stand for rebuttal testimony.
Okay, Dr. Coburn, as soon as you're ready, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have some articles that I'd like for the committee to see. Thank you. You know, everybody that's testified today here is a patriotic American. And you can be a patriotic American and not have great knowledge. The pastor who just spoke is absolutely correct. Tocqueville said, America will be great as long as America is good. When America ceases to be good, America will die. Now, if you know history, every republic in the history of the world has ultimately failed. They failed over the exact same reasons that our country is in trouble. And I have no doubt that the comments made by many here today are genuine, they're sincere, but having served 16 years in the U.S. Congress and 6 in the Congress and 10 in the Senate, here's my answer for you. Nobody's offered an opportunity that will actually fix the problem. And the problem isn't that we didn't have a good Constitution. I spent 10 years talking every week on the enumerated powers. I stopped $200 billion worth of spending with my one no by not allowing bills to go to the floor. The problem is we're not trying to change the Constitution. There's no effort on our part to change it. It is to restore it to what it was initially intended to be. People have all sorts of alternatives. Try nullification. You all will be here 1,000 years trying to nullify all the rules and regulations and court rulings that you don't like that come out of Washington. Nullification is impossible. Compacts, if you read the Constitution, are not a solution because they have to be approved by Congress. So a compact doesn't accomplish anything unless it's approved by Congress. And actually the Bill of Rights came out of an Article 5 Amendments Convention. What was happening is James Madison, along with John Jay, called a Article 5 convention. Congress said, we hear you. They passed the Bill of Rights, 10 out of the 13 applications for that. And we got our Bill of Rights without having to have an amendments convention. What we should fear is fear. We have a way to fix our country. We have a way to cheat history. We can cheat history. And I'll tell you what, rejection of going forward on the basis of fear decries those that have served this country in the past and created the opportunities and the prosperities that we have. I have an answer for every question that was raised for this. I won't take your time for that. If you'll read those two articles, I think you'll see most of the answers associated with it. If you think you can figure out a way to get career politicians to adhere to the enumerated powers, I'm all ears. And what I've told everybody is if you have a better way, those that are opposing what we're doing, to fix what's wrong with our country today, I will leave Convention of States. I'll come help you. But there isn't a better way. We designed our 3 areas for a very good reason. If you say fiscal responsibility, it gives you not only a balanced budget amendment, but the opportunity to say, oh, by the way, you have to use the same accounting standards everybody else does, called the generally accepted accounting principles. We didn't figure out that we were smart enough that we would know better than the collective representations of all the states on how best to enforce fiscal responsibility. That's why we didn't write it as a specific amendment. Same thing on scope and jurisdiction. We didn't write it as a specific amendment because we wanted to be actually put Article 1, Section 8 back into the Constitution. And we also wanted to return the Commerce Clause and the General Welfare Clause to what it was intended to be. These issues are all popular among even the people who oppose us. They want those things enforced. What I'm here to tell you is you're never going to see it. When are you ever going to get 60 senators to actually follow the U.S. Constitution? You're not. Because money has bought the politics in our country. And so what we have to do is we have to bring all these issues back to you where we can actually have an influence. In Oklahoma, I can call my representative and my state senator, and they'll actually answer the phone. If you call me as a U.S. senator, you'll get some clerk on the phone, and maybe or maybe not, you'll get called back. But the fact is the government closest to the people is the best government. I would remind you that long ago, the Congress started changing what was the intent, and the courts started changing what was the intent of our founders. We have to restore that. That's what we're asking for. If we fail this, what we will do is fail to do our duty to this country, its wonderful history, and its possibly bright future. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
Before the senator steps away, I would have.
Okay, we'll close the testimony from the floor and offer committee questions. Senator Maher.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Coburn, where are you at in your process? How many states have already passed this legislation?
We're filed in 38 states this year. 12 states have passed it. We've passed three committees already this year. Most of them just started February 1st. I don't know exactly what will happen this year. The people who are patriots on both sides of this issue is why this isn't going forward faster. And in oftentimes it's because we're talking across each other rather than with each other.
And then just one follow-up question I would have. In your opinion, Senator, if we get close to having enough states pass this, do you think the U.S. Congress would act?
Oh, sure. I'll just give you my opinion. One of the things I saw different since I didn't enter politics till my 50s is I see cowardice all the time in Washington. And as soon as the pressure comes, things change. Right? It's not based on intellectual thought. It's not based on what the Constitution says. It's based on where the pressure comes from. And what the Congress was designed for, sir, was to move slowly. And we've done everything except that since 1930. One side note, if I may, Mr. Chairman. 1963, the war on poverty began. $30 trillion later, we have 1.5% more in poverty in our country than we did when we started. And absent fathers in the home have quadrupled because of our policies. So we didn't have a war on poverty. We had a war on our budget, and we lost it.
Okay, further questions of this gentleman? Further questions from the committee? Senator Heinert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess, Senator, you'd probably be as good as any to answer this question. I'm concerned about really one area. Article 6 of the Constitution says that all treaties are the supreme law of the land. As a tribal member, and we have tribal members in our audience today, the unique relationship between the tribes in South Dakota that have a direct relationship with the federal government through treaty. And my concern is that if this was to open up and all of a sudden Article 6 is talked about, and those treaties then would become possibly null and void. I guess that is my concern. How do we guarantee that doesn't happen?
Well, you can guarantee that in a lot of ways. You could actually, whatever is there, you can instruct your delegation to bring that issue up. I represent more Native Americans as a state than any other state in the country. And our treaties do say, as long as the wind blows, as long as it snows, as long as the water runs, as long as the grass grows, these treaties are intact. So very difficult to change those treaties. You could not change it. Treaties have to be approved by Congress. So we could not write out a treaty that has been approved by Congress. What we could write is, here's how you approve treaties in the future. All right? So I don't believe that's a concern. And first of all, I don't think that's a concern for most Americans. If you know the story on how terribly we treated Native Americans as this country was established and grew, you know that we need to keep our word. And the fact that we hadn't kept our word, even with those treaties, is proof that we now should honor that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We do have a due pass motion before us, a motion and a second on SJR 3. Those in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed will say nay. Madam Secretary, please call a roll.
Senators Bolin.
Aye.
Kurd.
Aye.
Heinert.
Aye.
Langer.
Aye.
Maher.
Aye.
Norstrup.
Aye.
Sutton.
No.
Netherton.
Aye.
Ewing.
No.
We have 7 yes, 2 no.
Okay, Senate Joint Resolution 3 will go on down to the floor for further debate.